Do you need a good night's sleep? Then find something else to watch, because these scary farm stories are so disturbing they'll keep you up at night. Deep in the heart of rural Iowa, Kelly and I live a quiet life on our corn farm. We're used to being isolated from the world, surrounded only by endless fields and a few close-knit neighbours. But one August night in 2018, a storm raged outside, making our farm feel even more cut off from civilization. Little did we know that the real danger was about to come knocking at our door. We'd invited our friends Bill and his wife over for drinks and board games that night. As we laughed and drank, the storm grew stronger outside, creating an eerie ambience that seemed to creep into our home. When Bill and his wife left at 11 p.m, we were all pretty drunk. Kelly and I stayed up, watching a movie and drinking wine, until we were almost asleep on the couch. That's when the knock came at the door. We both heard a voice, muffled and urgent, calling out for help. It was a voice we didn't recognize, and it sent shivers down our spines. Kelly grabbed my arm and shook her head. No. But I couldn't ignore the desperation in the voice. I got up to answer the door, thinking it might be one of our neighbors caught in the storm. As I approached the door, the voice became clearer. "Oh my God, can you open up? We're lost!" the voice cried out. When I asked who is we, the voice responded, "My wife and I." But something about the voice was off, like it was being artificially pitched higher. I began to feel uneasy. Trying to lighten the mood, I asked if it was Bill playing a prank on us. The voice responded, "Yes," but it didn't sound like Bill at all. And when I asked for the name of his wife, the voice hesitated, and I knew something was wrong. I looked at Kelly, who was already dialing 911. We heard footsteps around our deck, and then one of them tried to open one of our windows. That's when we both started yelling at the top of our lungs, threatening to shoot if they didn't leave. I ran upstairs to get my shotgun, while Kelly stayed on the phone with the police. It felt like an eternity until Bill arrived, and I was never so relieved to see him. He had his shotgun with him, and we stood guard until the police finally arrived. After that night, we installed cameras around our property, and we never took our safety for granted again. It's a haunting memory that still sends chills down my spine, knowing that we were so close to danger without even realizing it. It was the summer of 2020, and I was alone on my grandparents' farm. They were away, and I was being paid to keep an eye on things. On the last night, I was watching TV in the living room when I heard an unsettling noise coming from outside in the cornfield. At first I assumed it was a deer, but then the cows started mooing at the same time. All of them. Something was definitely wrong. I decided to investigate and headed to the closet to grab a coat before heading outside. Just as I was about to step out, I heard a blood-curdling scream that sounded like it came from a cow. It sent shivers down my spine. I ran upstairs to my grandfather's room and loaded his hunting gun. Something was definitely not right. I stepped outside, and the cows were still mooing, so I headed to the barn to check on them. That's when I noticed one of them was missing. I heard strange noises coming from the cornfield outside the barn, but they didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard before. As I walked towards the field, I could hear people talking. It was bizarre. I knew I had to protect myself, so I fired 2 shots into the air. Suddenly, everything went silent. But then I heard footsteps in the cornfield. I didn't want to hide in the house while trespassers were on the property, so I walked into the field with my gun ready to fire. I soon realized that I was surrounded by people dressed in dark clothing and wearing eerie masks. It was like something out of a horror movie. As they began chanting, I was paralyzed with fear. I didn't understand the language they were speaking, but it sounded like some kind of ritual. I knew I had to escape, so I sprinted through the cornfield, firing shots to scare them away. When I got back to the farmhouse, I discovered something that left me traumatized. A cow's head was placed in the center of a circle of candles. It was a sight that I would never forget. I immediately called the police, and they arrived shortly after. The crime scene was active, and my parents came to pick me up. We discussed everything that had happened with the police, and my grandparents installed a high-tech security camera system to ensure that nothing like that would ever happen again. To this day, I still can't believe what I witnessed on that farm. It was a terrifying experience that will stay with me forever. Hey, hold up before we dive into the next thrilling story. If you're loving what you're seeing and can't wait for more, then hit that subscribe button and join the thrills on my channel. Let's keep the chills going together. My name is Chad, and I'm 27 years old. I live on my family's farm, a place I used to love, but now it feels like a prison. The endless fields, the silence, the isolation. I can't stand it anymore. However, my worst fears weren't related to boredom, but rather to the fact that the farm was a magnet for danger. One summer night, my parents went on a romantic vacation, and my sisters and I were left in charge of the farm. Everything was going smoothly, and we were looking forward to some much-needed relaxation. However, as the night grew darker, the peaceful silence was shattered by the frantic barking of our dogs. Something was out there, and it wasn't an animal. I grabbed one of our guns, ready to face the trespasser. But as I stepped outside, my heart sank. The dogs were barking at the crops, and I could hear human whistling coming from within. It was the sound of someone who knew they weren't welcome. I rushed back inside, and my sisters urged me not to go out there, but I couldn't just let someone invade our property like that. So I fired a shot into the air, hoping it would scare the intruder away. It did, but only for a little while. The dogs went crazy again, and this time I saw the figure standing in the field. He was just a silhouette, but I could feel his eyes on me. I yelled at him to leave, but he just stood there, taunting me with his whistling. I took a shot, missing on purpose, and he disappeared into the darkness. But I knew he was still out there, watching us, waiting for his next move. We barricaded ourselves inside, each with a gun and a dog for protection, but we knew it wouldn't be enough if the intruder decided to attack. The night dragged on, and every sound made us jump. But finally, the whistling stopped. We all breathed a sigh of relief. The next day, we searched the field, but there was no trace of the trespasser. From that day on, I knew I couldn't stay on the farm any longer. The danger was too real, too close. But I also knew I couldn't leave my family behind. So I made a plan to make the farm safer, to protect us from whatever might come our way. Now, every night, I patrol the property, armed and ready, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep my family safe, even if it means sacrificing my own freedom, because that's what being a man is all about. Buckle up, because there's a bone-chilling truth that's even more harrowing than the tales you just heard. Imagine a life without our captivating videos, and the spine-tingling thrill that comes with each one. Don't let that become your reality. Keep watching and let the chills continue.